Then I came across this paper. This was kind of like my eureka moment. This paper was called Banana Time, written by Donald Roy and published in Human Organization in 1959. It details the informal interactions between workers. Basically, the methods four workers use to bring meaning to their working day by pulling pranks on each other and eating together and having these interactions. These workers stand in front of clicking machines and cut shapes out of sheets of material all day long. Very unstimulating menial labour. The interactions between the men are the only thing that helps them maintain sanity. They perform the same pranks at the same time each and every day. One would think that this itself was monotonous, but the difference between boring repetitive things and non-boring repetitive things is that if something has meaning, it becomes relieving and not boring. They find things to wait for, make the boredom stop and start, and ease. They live by this timetable of their own making, bringing them autonomy and freedom. And through this freedom and autonomy, they were able to bring so much character to monotony. The repetition of these pranks became interesting and funny. Sammy brings a banana to work every day, even though he knows Ike's going to steal the banana at around 11 a.m. and shout banana time and eat it. So he knows he's never going to get to eat that banana, but he still brings it, because the importance of this ritual and cycle is so great to their working lives. This paper really started to fascinate me. I didn't believe people really act like that, repeating exactly the same actions, having catchphrases, repeating the same topics of conversation. The inhabitants of the Banana Time world were stuck in a loop, repeating coffee time, peach time, banana time, and so on. They were trapped in time and inaccessible to me. There was no one who I could ask who would answer my questions. I felt skeptical about its reality and exaggeration, but more like an optimistic skepticism. I didn't think it was real, but I wanted it to be. There was something that just annoyed me about this paper and kept drawing me back. I started picking apart this paper, dissecting the facts stated in it, the concrete information that I could work with, the items in the room with the workers, the times and the schedules. I listened to a podcast by various academics in which they were talking about the paper. I felt like they didn't delve deep enough for my kind of growing obsession, and my questions weren't answered and I was still kind of being haunted by them. But they did, however, agree that the element of ritual is more important to the times than the fact that they're pranks, because people pull pranks and have fun at work in a lot of workplaces, but Banana Time is an outlier due to the repetitive and ritualistic nature of these pranks.
He was working at what sounded like one of the most monotonous and repetitive types of organized labor that one could imagine, basically punching holes in different types of materials. Even in situations such as these, people found ways to avoid this grudging boredom by playing games and structuring their work in these different ways.
We expect fun and interactions and all kind of games also to happen at work, and it's not only that he found that that's a way to break down the monotony, but also that was a very ritualized way in which that happened.
I got to know the paper by rewriting it by hand. I liked how the process of writing it was laborious and arduous. I was working like the Banana Time characters worked. As part of my research, I emailed antique professionals and asked what objects they thought were there in the room. I collected images of things I imagined being present and collaged these with the text, trying to unite words with some twisted facsimile of the reality described. I was kind of trying to decipher the paper and find it within this world kind of 60 years on. I felt like I wanted to approach their reality and find out the facts. I made these objects into a probability type diagram, which kind of made it even clearer that I couldn't ever find like the actual things were there, because the amount of probability lines were crossing was so thick I could barely see through. I felt like this diagram expressed this idea of searching and strategizing and trying to reconstruct this world from nothing. It was really the interactions between the people and the times that I could get to, not the objects or the actual things present. But still, my interest in kind of visual aids to navigate the times continued, because when I showed other people the paper, they couldn't understand what I found so fascinating. And I kind of wanted to spark this fascination in other people, because I just found it so strange and amazing. So by hearing or seeing it differently, or having some tactility with objects, this text could be translated instead of being some strange reconstruction that I'm trying to find the truth from. I could make people experience it in my way, in the way that had my slant on top of it. I felt like I wanted to scrub it of everything except for the banana time day structure and keep that as like the real takeaway. I was quite comfortable to engage with an academic paper in these quite unusual ways because my relationship with it was kind of unusual. I had this unusual interest in it, and also just the format it was written in was unusual at the start, so I felt like leaning into that wasn't so strange an idea. I don't know if I'm making the academic format of it less accessible or more accessible. I think I'm just making it differently accessible. Like with every different experiment, I'm trying to access something different about the paper and kind of bring that to light through its presentation, and kind of taking ownership over it and changing it into a format that I would prefer to access it in. Like I would prefer to access it in these more sensory ways than reading the text, or I would prefer to access it in this like edited down format. My kind of breakthrough experiment was laser engraving on a banana. The first time I did it in a straight line, and the second time I curved the text to curve with the shape of the banana. So I had this edited down version of the text, and I had this printing on banana skins method, and I thought that the most obvious thing would be to print the entire text on banana skins, which doesn't really sound obvious, but to me, in my obsessive thinking of this paper, it seemed perfect. Peeling the banana and removing the inside made it a lot easier to laser cut on it because of the way that the laser focuses on flat things. This new material to work with the banana was really interesting because when I laser cut on it, it would be white like the fresh flesh of the banana, and then it would oxidize over time, turning brown, and then when the whole banana had turned black like a week later, the writing was still visible. It would be this kind of like lighter colour, so it kind of went through a lot of shades, and it was a very interesting way it reacted over time, this organic material. Like, I found this very exciting, and I decided I wanted to kind of like immortalize it, so I tried pressing it like a flower. And I think pressing them did have an impact on the longevity of the bananas, but they did inevitably start moulding, and I think maybe just the fact that the main fruit part of the banana was removed and it was just the skins and the juices were kind of crushed out of them, maybe that helped them survive. But I also tried kind of drying them out at a low temperature in an oven over a day to see if that would kind of help stop the moulding, but that didn't really work either. I basically arranged the bananas and sandwiched them between two pieces of paper, and then put these between two pieces of wood to protect the plates of the letterpress that I was crushing them in, and then the next day I would come back and take them out. So because of the sugar content, I'm assuming, in the banana, the paper kind of stuck to the banana skin in my first one, so then I decided to try using cling film between the pieces of paper to prevent it sticking, and I also tried greaseproof paper, which left this like really interesting like illustrative line pattern in the banana juices. Ended up in these kind of sculptural forms because of the warping of the paper, and they did start to mould, and both of these made it harder to read what was on them. So I decided to try embedding the bananas in resin. This was tricky because you're not meant to put organic material in resin because resin doesn't really like water, but the water content of banana skins wasn't too high, so I decided to give it a go. So I had a lot of interesting things to learn, like how you blow on the resin to remove any bubbles. I was learning how to make vacuum molds with plastic to pour the resin into, what it releases from and doesn't release from. I ended up coating some of the bananas in this top coat to try and seal them and stop the organic material reacting with the resin, which would produce like this kind of leakage at the bottom that made it so you couldn't even handle the resin block because it would burn your hands. And also I tried ways to preserve the banana so that I would have more time before I had to get it into the resin. I tried putting the laser engraved bananas in some pickle juice and keeping it in a jar in the fridge, and I also tried submerging it in water to try and stop the oxidation. The banana that was in the pickling juice looked really defined whilst it was in the jar, but when I took it out and left it for about 10 minutes, the pigment in the lettering started to bleed, almost if it had actually been real ink. And this one was a lot more yellow than the banana that I left submerged in water, which turned a bit more grey and became a bit mushy, and it didn't really help with the definition of the letters at all. So through all these really interesting material experiments, which I would like to keep going, I kind of learned enough about putting the bananas in resin and how that worked and what adverse reactions might take place that I had kind of the tips and tricks to avoid and fix these afterwards. So I was able to start making my final outcome. I wanted to write the whole banana time edit that I had on bananas and then put these in resin so they would last longer and be able to be held. And it's meant to be read like the banana timetable, like at certain times, because I felt when I played out this timetable myself, it really helped me get through the day, and it actually was quite a useful thing for me. So I thought it might benefit other people to really experience it and give them the best shot of engaging with it, because the first time they engage with it will be very intensive and like, you know, an 8-hour long project. I ended up with 18 bananas, and that meant 6 resin blocks, and I wanted to make a box to house them in to protect them because I wanted them to be portable and to be read throughout your working day. I did this because this felt like a kind of ambitious and most adventurous experiment to round up all my explorations with the paper, and I felt like I had gleaned everything I could from it, and maybe I wanted to engage with it like one more time and then try and pass it on to other people and see how it would work with them. I just wanted to see if anyone would react to the paper like I did, would influence someone else, and it just felt like a nice way to round up my experience with it, to try and somehow pass it on. Because the paper is still out there and people can still read it and find it and interact with it, but I thought maybe I would try and increase the chances by putting my own version out there. In the future, I would like to get more people's opinions on what they think the box's effect is on them, because I know it's kind of my imagination that it would help you get through the working day, or it would teach you something about taking breaks, or it would bring kind of banana time to life in this modern context. But most of this project is about me like imagining extra things around banana time that no one else really sees. So it's not known currently what the effects of this box actually would be outside of my own imagination. That makes it a suitable outcome for a project like this that's just about my own kind of interests and obsessions. These slices of resin are like a thin slice of time. Each resin block of bananas represents a break time to pause and reflect. The tactility of this object is important during menial work, as when you repeat one task over and over, you might become more clumsy and you might be working with heavy machinery, but touching something delicate like resin that can be scratched or broken and that's encased in foam casing to protect it in a heavy box, it's just a totally different experience to kind of recenter.